Poor girl. Rejected at the altar, she shows up at a wedding with a billionaire. What happens when a heartbroken girl takes a stranger to her ex's wedding, not knowing he's hiding the biggest secret of his life? This story will shock you. Madison Riley stared at the golden envelope in her trembling hands like it was a court summons. The elegant script seemed to mock her from the creamy paper. Tyler and Jessica cordially invite you to celebrate their union at Grandview Manor. She didn't need to read the rest. Her ex-boyfriend, the same guy who was watching Netflix on her couch just 4 months ago, was marrying the colleague he swore meant nothing to him. The venue, Grandview Manor, the exact place she'd dreamed of getting married since she was a teenager. Madison slumped against her apartment door, sliding down until she hit the floor. "Seriously, universe?" she muttered. "This is your idea of cosmic justice?" The breakup had been brutal enough. Tyler's rehearsed speech about needing space to grow still echoed in her mind. 2 weeks later, his Instagram was flooded with pictures of romantic getaways with Jessica. Now this invitation felt like salt in an already gaping wound. But as Madison sat there on her worn carpet, surrounded by unpaid bills and the lingering scent of yesterday's takeout, a dangerous idea began to form. She wasn't going to that wedding alone. She was going to walk in with someone so impressive that Jessica would question every life choice she'd ever made. There was just one problem. Madison didn't know anyone like that, and her bank account couldn't exactly fund a male escort service. The next morning, after another rejection email from a potential employer, Madison decided she needed air. She wandered through downtown Denver, her mind still spinning with impossible schemes, when she spotted him. Near the entrance of an upscale restaurant, a man sat against the brick wall, watching the world go by with an almost philosophical calm. His clothes were worn, his beard unkempt, but something about his posture suggested he wasn't asking for anything from anyone. He observed the passing crowd like an anthropologist studying a fascinating species. Madison slowed her pace. Most homeless people she'd encountered either avoided eye contact or actively sought it for help. This man seemed perfectly content in his solitude, which somehow made him more intriguing. "The rough day?" she asked, stopping a few feet away. He looked up with startling green eyes that seemed far too alert for someone living on the streets. "Depends on your definition of rough," he replied, his voice carrying an unexpected smoothness. "Though I'd say any day you wake up breathing is a win." Madison found herself smiling despite her mood. "Fair point. I'm Madison." "Jackson," he said simply. "Jackson, you look like you could use a meal and maybe a shower. I've got a proposition for you." His eyebrow raised slightly. "I'm listening." "Come with me to a wedding this Saturday. I'll feed you, clean you up, and give you a place to crash. All you have to do is pretend to be madly in love with me for about 4 hours. Jackson studied her face for a long moment. "Oh, this sounds like the beginning of either a romantic comedy or a true crime documentary." "Hopefully the first one," Madison laughed. "So, what do you say?" Jackson stood up with surprising grace, dusting off his worn jeans. "Lady, you just made me an offer I can't refuse." As they walked toward her apartment together, Madison had no idea she'd just recruited a former Fortune 500 CEO for the performance of a lifetime. 3 days later, Madison stood in her tiny bathroom doorway, watching Jackson emerge from what might have been the longest shower in human history. The transformation was staggering. Gone was the scruffy wanderer she'd found on the street corner. In his place stood a man who belonged on magazine covers. "Okay," she said, trying not to stare. "You clean up surprisingly well." Jackson ran a hand through his now styled hair and grinned. "And surprising is my middle name. Your middle name better not be Dangerous, because I'm starting to think I'm in over my head." Over the past few days, Jackson had proven to be unlike any homeless person she'd ever met. He quoted Shakespeare while doing dishes, new wine pairings despite claiming he hadn't eaten a real meal in months, and spoke about global politics with the insight of someone who'd actually been in boardrooms where decisions were made. When Madison questioned him about his background, he'd deflect with humor or change the subject entirely. All she knew was that he was intelligent, charming, and hiding something significant. "So," she said, handing him a crisp white shirt she'd borrowed from her cousin's husband, "what's our story?" "Our story. For the wedding, people will ask how we met, what you do for work, how long we've been together. We need to get our facts straight." Jackson buttoned the shirt with practiced ease. "Tell me about this ex of yours first. What kind of man am I supposedly superior to?" Madison's expression darkened. "Tyler Morrison. Investment banker. Drives a BMW he can't really afford. Thinks using big words makes him sound important. He's the kind of guy who tips 15% and thinks he's generous." "Ah," Jackson nodded. "The trying too hard type. And Jessica?" "Marketing coordinator, perfect Instagram life, and apparently irresistible to men who claim they want authentic women but actually prefer social media influencers." "Got it. So I need to be everything he's not." Madison studied Jackson's face as he adjusted his collar. With his hair properly styled and wearing clothes that actually fit, he looked like he could run a company. "Who are you really, Jackson?" He paused, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "For Saturday night, I'm whoever you need me to be. If you're enjoying this story of unexpected love and hidden identities, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat." Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect weather that made Madison wonder if the universe was mocking her again. She stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the emerald dress she'd splurged on with her credit card, telling herself this was an investment in her dignity. Jackson appeared in the doorway wearing a navy suit that somehow fit him perfectly, despite being borrowed from 3 different sources. "Ready for battle?" he asked. "Ready to win," Madison replied, though her stomach was doing gymnastics. The drive to Grandview Manor felt both eternal and too short. Jackson seemed completely relaxed, one hand on her knee in a gesture that felt surprisingly natural. "Remember," he said softly, "we're not here to prove anything to them. We're here to prove something to ourselves, which is that we're exactly where we belong." Grandview Manor was everything Madison remembered from her teenage fantasies. Sweeping staircases, crystal chandeliers, and enough white roses to supply a small funeral home. As they walked through the entrance, arm in arm, Madison felt the familiar weight of judgment from the perfectly dressed crowd. Then she heard Tyler's voice behind her. "Madison? Wow. I didn't expect to see you here." She turned, plastering on her most confident smile. Tyler looked exactly the same, still handsome in a generic way, still wearing that slightly smug expression that used to make her stomach flutter, but now just irritated her. "Tyler," she said warmly. "Congratulations. This is Jackson, my boyfriend." Jackson stepped forward with the kind of confidence that filled a room. His handshake with Tyler lasted just long enough to establish dominance without being obvious about it. "Nice to meet you, Tyler. Madison's told me so much about you." Tyler's eyes darted between them, clearly trying to process how Madison had managed to upgrade so dramatically. "Jackson, what do you do?" "I'm in renewable energy consulting," Jackson replied smoothly. "International sustainability projects. I just got back from Norway, actually." Madison blinked. Where had that come from? "Norway," Tyler repeated, clearly impressed despite himself. "That must be interesting." "The work takes me all over the world," Jackson continued, his arm sliding around Madison's waist in a gesture that looked completely natural. "But Madison keeps me grounded. She's got this incredible project working with rescued animals and urban reforestation. Madison had to admire his creativity. She did volunteer at the animal shelter on weekends, and she had mentioned wanting to plant a community garden in her neighborhood. "How nice," Tyler said, though his smile was getting tighter. "Well, I should find Jessica. She'll want to meet you both." As Tyler walked away, Madison whispered, "Norway, really?" "It seemed sophisticated," Jackson whispered back, and far enough away that he can't fact-check. They found their assigned table near the dance floor. Jackson seemed completely at ease in the formal setting, making conversation with the other guests about everything from sustainable architecture to international cuisine. Madison watched in fascination as he charmed a retired diplomat and his wife, discussing Norwegian environmental policies with enough detail to sound authoritative. "Where did you learn all this?" she whispered during a lull in conversation. "YouTube University," he replied with a wink. Madison laughed, but she wasn't convinced. Nobody learned to work a room like this from online videos. The ceremony began with Tyler looking nervous at the altar and Jessica making her grand entrance in a dress that probably cost more than Madison's rent. As the bride walked down the aisle, Madison felt Jackson's hand find hers under the table. "You okay?" he murmured. Madison realized she was. Watching Tyler marry Jessica felt like watching a movie about someone else's life. The man she'd once thought she loved seemed like a stranger now, and not in a painful way. More like she'd finally put on glasses and could see clearly for the first time. "Yeah," she whispered back. "I really am." After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, Jessica approached their table with the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Madison," she gushed. "You look amazing, and this must be the mysterious boyfriend Tyler mentioned." Jackson stood and took Jessica's hand with old-world courtesy. "Jackson Crawford, and you must be the bride. Congratulations." "Thank you, Jackson. Tyler mentioned you work in sustainability. Environmental consulting. Yes, I help countries develop renewable energy infrastructure. It's not glamorous work, but it's meaningful." Jessica's eyes lit up with the kind of interest that made Madison's jaw clench. "That sounds fascinating. You must travel constantly." "I do, but I'm thinking of settling down more." Jackson's arm slipped around Madison's shoulders. "And when you find someone who makes everywhere feel like home, the appeal of constant travel starts to fade." Madison felt her heart skip in a way that had nothing to do with their performance. Jessica's smile became more forced. How romantic. Well, I should mingle with the other guests. Enjoy the reception. As she walked away, Madison noticed Jessica's posture was slightly less confident than before. "You're enjoying this," Madison observed. "Maybe a little," Jackson admitted. "She seems like the type who's used to being the most interesting person in the room." During dinner, Tyler made a speech thanking various people for attending, including dear friends like Madison who've been part of my journey. The condescension in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. Jackson leaned close to Madison's ear. "Want to get some air?" They stepped onto the terrace overlooking the manor's gardens. The evening was warm, and the sound of laughter and music drifted from inside. "Thank you," Madison said suddenly. "For what?" "For making me remember that I deserve better than scraps of attention from men who don't see my worth." Jackson turned to face her fully. "Madison, any man who would give you up for someone else is either blind or an idiot." "Probably both." There was something in his voice that made her really look at him. In the soft light from the garden lanterns, Jackson's face had an intensity she hadn't noticed before. "Who are you really?" she asked again. This time, Jackson didn't deflect. Someone who lost everything because he trusted the wrong people. Someone who's been hiding from the world because it seemed easier than fighting for a place in it. Someone who met a girl crazy enough to invite a stranger to her ex's wedding and remembered what it felt like to want to be better. Before Madison could respond, they heard voices approaching. Tyler and Jessica were walking onto the terrace, apparently seeking the same escape they were. "Oh," Jessica said, her voice slightly slurred from champagne. "Sorry, we didn't know anyone was out here." "No problem," Madison replied. "We were just admiring the view." Tyler's eyes were fixed on Jackson with obvious curiosity. "Jackson, I've been meaning to ask, which company do you work for?" Jackson didn't hesitate. "I'm freelance now. After my last corporate position ended badly, I decided independence was worth more than security." "Corporate position." Jessica perked up. "What kind of company?" "Tech sector," Jackson said smoothly. But honestly, that life nearly destroyed me. Sometimes you have to lose everything to figure out what actually matters." Madison watched Tyler and Jessica exchange glances. They clearly wanted more details. But Jackson had just masterfully shut down their fishing expedition while making himself sound both successful and mysteriously damaged. "Well," Tyler said, after an awkward pause, "we should get back to our guests." After they left, Madison stared at Jackson in the moonlight. "You were in tech." "I was in a lot of things," Jackson said carefully. "Most of them were mistakes." The following week passed in a strange sort of domestic bliss. Jackson had somehow become a permanent fixture in Madison's small apartment, cooking meals that were far too sophisticated for someone who claimed to have been living on the streets, reading books he pulled from her shelves like he'd already read them before, and making observations about world events that suggested he had inside knowledge. Madison found herself looking forward to coming home from her job search, knowing Jackson would be there with coffee and that crooked smile that made her stomach flutter. But the questions were multiplying faster than she could ignore them. "Jackson," she said one evening as they cleaned up after dinner, "I need you to tell me the truth." He froze, a dish towel in his hands. "About what?" "About everything. About who you are, where you came from, how you know the things you know. About why you were living on the street when you're clearly educated and capable. About why you cook like a chef and know wine like a sommelier and discuss international politics like you've been briefed by government officials." Jackson set down the towel and leaned against the counter. For a long moment, he just looked at her. "My real name is Jackson Crawford," he said finally. That part was true. And I was living on the street because sometimes when your entire life explodes, the simplest solution is to disappear completely. "What kind of explosion?" Jackson ran a hand through his hair. "The kind that involves congressional hearings, federal investigations, and your face on the front page of every major newspaper in the country." Madison felt the blood drain from her face. "What did you do?" "Nothing," Jackson said quietly. "That was the problem. I was the CEO of Crawford Industries. We manufactured components for renewable energy systems, solar panels, wind turbines, that kind of thing. I built that company from nothing, and it was worth about $2 billion when everything fell apart." Madison sank onto a kitchen stool. $2 billion. My business partner was embezzling money and selling trade secrets to competitors. When the FBI investigation started, he made sure all the evidence pointed to me. By the time I could prove my innocence, the company was bankrupt, my reputation was destroyed, and I'd lost everything. My house, my cars, my friends, my fiancé, all of it gone. "So you became homeless?" "I chose to become invisible," Jackson corrected. "There's a difference. I could have fought it in court for years, spent whatever money I had left on lawyers and lived in the public eye while they dissected every decision I'd ever made. Instead, I walked away, liquidated what assets I could access, put the money in a trust for environmental causes, and disappeared. Madison processed this information slowly. How long ago? 3 years. I've been living day to day ever since, trying to figure out who I am when I'm not Jackson Crawford, CEO. Turns out it's harder than you'd think to rebuild an identity from scratch. And now? Jackson looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Now I think I might be ready to try being someone new, someone better. That night, Madison lay awake staring at the ceiling while Jackson slept on the couch. Everything made sense now, his confidence, his knowledge, his ability to command a room. But it also meant their entire relationship was built on a performance. He'd been playing a role just as much as she had. The next morning, she found Jackson in the kitchen reading news articles on his phone, something she'd never seen him do before. "Anything interesting?" she asked, pouring herself coffee. "Crawford Industries is being sold to a competitor," he said, without looking up. "The new owners are dismantling the Environmental Research Division and moving manufacturing overseas." "I'm sorry." Jackson shrugged, but Madison could see the tension in his shoulders. "It was never really mine anyway. I built it, but I couldn't protect it. What if you could?" "What do you mean?" Madison sat across from him. "What if you went back? Not as the old Jackson Crawford, but as who you are now, someone who's learned what actually matters." Jackson looked at her like she'd suggested he climb Mount Everest in flip-flops. "Madison, I can't just waltz back into the corporate world. There are still people who think I'm a criminal, then prove them wrong. It's not that simple." "Maybe it is," Madison said. "Maybe it's exactly that simple. Are you rooting for Jackson to reclaim his life? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to see how this incredible story unfolds. You won't believe what happens next." Over the next few days, Madison watched Jackson wrestle with the idea. He'd pace around her small apartment, make phone calls to lawyers and former colleagues, and research everything that had happened to his company since his departure. Slowly, a plan began to form. "The patents," he said one evening, looking up from his laptop. "I still own the patents for the core technologies. They can't manufacture anything without licensing them from me." "That's good, right?" "It's leverage," Jackson said thoughtfully. "Not enough to reclaim the company, but enough to make demands about how it's used." Madison could see the old Jackson emerging, the entrepreneur who'd built an empire from nothing. But there was something different about him now, a depth that hadn't been there before. "What would you demand?" "Environmental protections, ethical manufacturing standards, investment in communities where we build facilities. All the things I should have insisted on from the beginning." "So do it." Jackson looked at her for a long moment. "If I do this, everything changes. The anonymity, the simple life we've been building here, all of it disappears." "Maybe," Madison said. "Or maybe it evolves into something better." That night, Jackson made the call to his former lawyer. Madison listened from the kitchen as he explained where he'd been for 3 years and what he wanted to do. She could hear only one side of the conversation, but Jackson's voice grew stronger and more confident with each exchange. When he hung up, he looked like a different person. "Well," Madison asked. "Meeting on Monday. They want to settle everything quietly and move forward." Apparently, they never really believed I was guilty. They just couldn't prove it while the investigation was ongoing. Madison felt a mixture of excitement and dread. "That's wonderful." Jackson caught the hesitation in her voice. "What aren't you saying? I'm just wondering where this leaves us." "You'll be back to being a CEO, living in a world I don't understand, dealing with people who see me as a liability." Jackson crossed the room and took her hands. "Madison, you brought me back to life. You made me remember who I wanted to be. Whatever happens next, I want you there with me. Even if I don't fit into that world, especially if you don't fit." That world nearly destroyed me once. I need someone who'll keep me grounded in reality. The meeting on Monday went better than Jackson had hoped. Not only were the charges officially dropped, but his former investors wanted him back. Crawford Industries 2.0, they called it. Same innovative technology, but with ethical practices and environmental responsibility built into the foundation. Madison waited for him at a coffee shop near the law offices, trying to read a book but mostly just staring at the same page. When Jackson walked in, he looked like the successful businessman he'd once been, but he sat down across from her with the same gentle smile she'd fallen in love with. "So," she asked, "they want me to be CEO again?" "Full control, bigger budget than before, and a mandate to do things right this time." Madison's heart sank and soared simultaneously. "Congratulations. I said I'd give them an answer by Friday. Jackson, this is your chance to reclaim everything you lost." "Not everything," he said quietly. "I lost things that weren't worth keeping, and I found something I can't imagine living without. Don't make this decision based on me. This is your life, your career, your chance to change the world." Jackson reached across the table and took her hand. "Madison, for 3 years I lived like a ghost. I told myself I was finding myself, but really I was just hiding. You didn't just give me a place to stay or help me clean up for a wedding. You gave me a reason to want to be alive again." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'll take the job on one condition. That Crawford Industries 2.0 includes a community outreach division focused on environmental education and urban sustainability. And I want you to run it." Madison stared at him. "I don't know anything about running a corporate division. You know about bringing people together. You know about seeing potential where others see problems. You know about taking someone who's lost and helping them find their way back." Jackson's grip on her hand tightened. "You saved me, Madison. Let me help you save the world." Madison felt tears building in her eyes. "That's quite a career change from unemployed retail worker. I prefer to think of it as a promotion." That evening, they walked through Madison's neighborhood, past the bodega where she bought her morning coffee, past the community center where she'd volunteered with kids, past the empty lot where she'd always imagined a community garden could flourish. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up," Madison said. "And 2 weeks ago, I was crying over my ex's wedding invitation. Now I'm dating a reformed billionaire who wants to change the world together." "Reformed? Aren't you?" Jackson considered this. "I think I'm more like recycled, same base materials, but reprocessed into something hopefully more useful." Madison laughed. "That's appropriately environmental of you. I have my moments." They paused in front of the empty lot. "You know," Jackson said thoughtfully, "this would be perfect for a pilot program. Community gardens, renewable energy education, maybe some kind of job training center. You're already thinking like a CEO again. I'm thinking like someone who wants to make sure the mistakes I made before don't happen again." Jackson turned to face her. "Madison, I meant what I said about wanting you there with me. But I need you to know what you'd be signing up for. There will be media attention, board meetings, people who'll judge you for dating the boss. It won't be easy." Madison looked at the empty lot, imagining it transformed into something beautiful and useful. "Will you still make me coffee in the morning? Every morning. Will you still listen to me complain about stupid things, especially the stupid things? Will you still be the guy who was kind to a stranger who offered him a crazy deal?" Jackson's expression grew serious. "Madison, that guy isn't going anywhere. He's the part of me I thought I'd lost forever. You helped me find him again." Madison stood on her tiptoes and kissed him softly. "Then let's go change the world." 6 months later, Madison stood in front of a room full of reporters, city officials, and community leaders, preparing to announce the launch of the Crawford Community Initiative. Jackson sat in the front row, giving her an encouraging nod. "When I first met Jackson Crawford," she began, "he was sitting on a sidewalk, and I was carrying a wedding invitation that felt like a death sentence. Neither of us knew who we really were or what we were capable of. But sometimes the best journeys start when you're completely lost." The program they'd developed was unlike anything either of them had imagined. Instead of traditional corporate charity, they'd created a model where communities identified their own needs, and Crawford Industries provided resources and expertise to help implement solutions. The empty lot in Madison's neighborhood had become the first pilot site, a combination community garden, renewable energy demonstration center, and job training facility. "The Crawford Community Initiative isn't about us helping you," Madison continued. "It's about all of us working together to build the kinds of communities we want to live in. Communities where everyone has opportunities, where environmental sustainability isn't a luxury but a basic standard, and where success is measured not just in profits but in lives improved." After the presentation, a reporter approached Madison. "Ms. Riley, there are rumors that you and Mr. Crawford are engaged. Can you confirm?" Madison looked over at Jackson, who was deep in conversation with a city councilwoman about expanding the program to other neighborhoods. He caught her eye and winked. "We're engaged in changing the world," Madison replied diplomatically. "Everything else is just details." But later that evening, as they sat in their new apartment, bigger than Madison's old place but still modest by Billionaire standards, Jackson pulled out a small velvet box. "I know we said we were taking things slow," he said, "but I've been carrying this around for a month, and I keep thinking about how much time I've already wasted in my life." Madison's heart stopped. "Jackson, I'm not asking you to marry me tonight," he said quickly. "I'm asking if you'll consider the possibility of building a life together, a real life, with all the messy, complicated, beautiful parts that come with it." Madison looked at the ring, a simple solitaire that somehow managed to be both elegant and unpretentious. It was perfect. "Can I see our emotional contract first?" she asked with a grin. "And I've been working on it." Madison read the handwritten list. Clause 1. "We promise to always be honest with each other, even when the truth is difficult." Clause 2. "We promise to support each other's dreams, even when they scare us." Clause 3. "We promise to remember that we're a team, especially when we disagree." Jackson laughed and pulled out a piece of paper. Clause 4. "We promise to keep building the kind of love that makes us both better people." Clause 5. "We promise to never stop being amazed by how far we've come." Madison felt tears running down her cheeks. I have one addition." "What's that?" "We promise to always remember that the best things in life happen when you're brave enough to help a stranger." Jackson slipped the ring onto her finger. "Agreed." As they kissed in their living room, surrounded by boxes of files for their new projects and photos from community events, Madison thought about how different her life had become. She'd started out wanting to prove something to her ex-boyfriend and ended up discovering who she really was. Outside their window, the city stretched out in all directions, full of possibilities and people who might need a second chance. Tomorrow, they'd get back to work on changing the world. Tonight, they'd celebrate the fact that sometimes the best revenge is living well, and sometimes the best love stories start with the worst ideas. Madison had never believed in fairy tales, but as she fell asleep next to Jackson, she realized that real life could be even better than fiction. Because real life included morning coffee, shared dreams, and the satisfaction of knowing that their love story was also making the world a little bit better. And if Tyler and Jessica happened to read about their engagement in the business section of the newspaper, well, that was just a bonus. Thank you for joining us on Madison and Jackson's incredible journey from heartbreak to hope. from loneliness to love, and from small dreams to world-changing plans. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. We have so many more amazing stories to share with you. What did you think of Madison and Jackson's story? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to rate this story from 1 to 10. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin with the most unexpected encounters.